think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
Do not trust any friends or family members. I repeat, do not trust friends.
This is the first time we're recording live. We're recording live, though, ladies and gentlemen, straight from the battle shed with James
and Chris.
On
in a battle shed.
In the Extinction Agenda battle shed. Chris has come to visit because it's dual birthday time in birthday land.
It's a good time of year.
It's fine, but some people celebrate Halloween. Not us. Well, actually, no, maybe we do.
I think we're doing it.
Yeah, I think so, because it's vampire time. It's time to discuss vampires through the lens of a little movie we like to call. What do we let the right one in? What's this movie called again?
That's the Swedish one.
Yep. 2008, directed by Thomas Alfredson. I don't think he's Swedish, and I didn't actually. Well, Thomas.
Probably.
Yeah,
Alfredson. That sounds like a.
Yeah.
As a hockey player.
Right.
To be Swedish, yeah.
Yeah, who would go on to do Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Do you like that movie? You ever seen it?
I've never seen it.
Oh, no. Man. What a great movie.
I hear good things. If there's one thing that's going to break my impasse on spy movies, it's probably that one.
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, that's a banger. And so I'd only seen the American one. I'd never seen the Swedish version. But I knew its prestige, amongst the vampire films. Ebert himself called it one of the greatest vampire films ever.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Ebert.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I probably already said I saw the American remake by the guy who went on to do the Batman, Matt Reeves. He also did Cloverfield. So he has a dubious career. But I liked it, and then on the strength of that, I was like, oh man, the original source material must be like exceptional. And I think it is. I think it's still like a quiet movie. This is a very small movie.
Yeah. It's a thoughtful movie. There's a lot of visual detail. It's got its own visual language, really.
Yeah. So. You've seen it numerous times, or once before, or
yeah, I'd say that's probably my third watching.
Okay, all right. So so I don't know what. I have my own thoughts about it, but I mean they might not be particularly informed. So what would open us up on? Let the right one in.
All right, I think I'd have to talk a little bit about my I've always loved vampire stories, even dating back to like shitty X-Men, Dracula showing up and stuff like that.
Claremont.
Yeah, and like Dracula. I remember seeing a play of Dracula when I was like in grade 7 or something like that. So it just kind of was always in the background, and then it kind of fell off for me when I started. I don't know, when vampires got shitty. Like I guess there's a long period of time. So I think that this movie was really interesting to me because I think it subverts a lot of the tropes of vampire movies. It really kind of reinvigorated what's going on in vampire stories. I think we kind of have to talk about a little bit about vampires in general before we start looking in because of those things.
Yeah. So I've never read the original Dracula, although I've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula. What's his nose. I think we covered some of this a bit, like the basic lore in when we did Near Dark and Interview with the Vampire, but I don't know, what's the first thing to say? They are obviously they're a leech. They are a parasite, but they're often associated with the aristocracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Associated with capital, with real estate purchases. I think you were telling me like Dracula moves into London and he immediately. I might be misremembering, but he starts like buying up real estate.
He starts buying up real estate.
Yeah. And I think even Marx uses the metaphor of the vampire when talking about the capitalist.
Yeah.
That's just one thing. I mean, they've got other things going for them.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think there's besides the obvious stuff like but I think there's an element of Dracula, particularly that's sort of like this fear of sexuality. That's like bohemian men are gonna fuck your wives, and just like weirdos coming after you, disrupting the the middle class order. But I think actually, and I didn't realize this until now. Apparently, Bram Stoker was closeted and gay, and wrote sort of like revealing letters to Walt Whitman and some other figures. So that I don't know how much of that is. There's one scene where it's described as like basically a threesome between Mina Harker and Jonathan Harker. He's like, Jonathan's like passed out on the bed, and like they walk in, and like Dracula's got her to his breast, and she's like feeding like from his just from him.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like the state of undress.
Right.
So, yeah. So anyway, there's obviously like suffice to say, there's like an eroticism at the core of like all vampire stories, pretty much.
And that gets taken up in the 70s in like French cinema. I'm thinking of like what's his name, Jean Renoir or whatever his fucking name is. Roland. He's, you know, like there's all these like lesbian vampire flicks, you know, and I think we missed that when we talked about Interview with the Vampire and the queer elements of it. Like that queer element is, well, you're telling me now is perhaps at the epicenter of the vampire myth, is like Gothic.
A lot of things. There's one of the first stories, Carmilla.
Oh right. Yeah.
Very much about that. I think these two stories obviously touch on queer spaces.
Okay, we're gonna have to talk to me a little bit more about that. The Hunger, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, so another movie we watched in preparation for this was The Hunger. However, you know, it's not really. I think we're going to be talking about vampires just a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't think I'm being dense. What are the queer elements in Let the Right One In?
Okay. Yeah. So, this is probably more apparent in the book.
Okay.
But there is a scene in the movie where, first of all, Ellie says, you know, what if I'm not a girl? And like you think that she's saying I'm a vampire.
Right.
But she's not. She is actually castrated. So the scene when he walks in on her in the bathroom and like it just briefly flashes like there's a scar.
Okay.
And so it's like strongly implied that Ellie was castrated at some point.
Right. And
biologically born male.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay. Interesting. Wow. Okay, I missed that completely.
Yeah, so the book's a little more, like, very more explicit about it. I actually read the novel, and I kind of stopped, like, halfway, maybe, like, 3/4 through, because it just, I don't know, it didn't have it was, even at the time, felt just a bit trans-negative, like, just, like, there was this, I think an undercurrent of maybe disgust at that, and, like, I didn't really know what tone the book was going for, so it just, I always meant to pick it up again. It just didn't happen. It wasn't like I was like, I'm not reading this anymore. I paused. But anyway, it's more explicit in the book. The helper, Ellie's helper, is explicitly a pedophile.
I read about that. Yeah.
So there's it's the movie kind of pulls back on some of the more elements that'd be more controversial for sure.
Yeah, I you know, looking over the Wikipedia, they got the original author to do the screenplay. And he wisely pared things down.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I think that because he's like, there's no way these things could have been handled appropriately in a film.
Absolutely not.
Of this length, you know.
Yeah. So. The book is Lundquist is a very thoughtful writer. Like I really like other books that he's done. Like I think I think Lundquist is actually part of the reason horrors have had a revival in the last decade. Just like he writes very intelligently in general. Just maybe some elements of this one are a bit dated now. The third thing I wanted to mention about vampires in general is that there's always this element of peril to the soul or to the self. And I think some of the popularity of vampire stories had this sense of the implied damnation. In other words, I think you have to kind of read them in the context of Christianity, classically.
Yeah.
Like this idea that the soul could be destroyed through no fault of your own. And it's part and parcel of a Christian worldview that held a special terror for me when I was a kid. So I think that was also part of the appeal of vampire stories for me. But I think this movie goes a long way, in particular, to subvert that idea. And we'll talk about that. But that some innocence has to be, or this movie plays with that idea. It subverts that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
The funny thing, okay, so there's Oscar the kid. This is Stockholm in early 1980s or something like that, or mid 1980s. It says Wikipedia. I wouldn't have been able to glean that from, aside from like fashion and technology, I wouldn't really have been able to glean that from the movie. It doesn't like cover date anything. I don't think. Maybe there's a newspaper I missed somewhere.
Swedish people could just dress like that, probably.
Yeah, that's true. But so there's Oscar. He's the kid, the bullied kid who has, I'll say like serial killer tendencies. Like he's very troubled. But like I just saw the scene now when he first encounters Ellie, the vampire girl, who's a little girl. I understand from the Wikipedia she's 200 years old though, or something like that. And which got me thinking about Haken, her helper, her keeper. And I didn't know he was a pedophile, and I didn't know the backstory, but I really got the impression, just coming in without context, that Haken was once a little boy like Oscar.
I think so too.
Yeah. And she finds these little boys and she falls in love with them, and or has them fall in love with her, and provides an outlet for their serial killer tendencies, recognizes that they want to be murderers and then allows them to be murderers through love. That's how this movie seems to me. That pedophile angle makes it a little like that, implies that he was a grown man when he bumped into her.
That is the way it does complicate things in a, that way. I think your interpretation is right, although I think the movie complicates it a little bit in terms of her, like, I think just a question that hangs over it is Ellie a parasite? And I don't think that's 100% true.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so, okay, I'm going to try to read your mind. The complicating element is, so let's say, I'm thinking of that exchange when she's like, I see in you, you want to kill, but I don't want to kill. Ellie says, like, I don't want to kill, like, I have to, and I kind of puzzled over the line, like, please be me for a time or something like that. I forget.
Yeah, be me a little.
Yeah, something like that. And I don't know. Be me for a little while. Just, stand in my shoes for a little bit, or is it like take some quality of myself?
I think that's it. Yeah. Because I think the context of that is when she's telling him. So Oscar's like chronically plagued by bullies. I think it's also important to recognize that what we see from Oscar, these sort of like serial killer tendencies, are a reaction to like just a completely bullied and dominated kid. Like when we first see him, like with his knife, he's quoting what the bullies say to him: "Squeal like a pig."
Yeah.
So it's like you're like, holy shit, what's up, kid?
Yeah.
But then you see that like this is what's being done to him. It's being replicated in him, and there's a whole series of. I mean, I think one thing that this movie meditates on is how violence spreads and how it's replicated in people who are oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's strange that I don't know if it's strange, it's very human, but that his mom has no idea that he's been bullied. Like, he's constantly concealing it from her, even though it's clear, like, something, I forget what particular injury, he says he just tripped or whatever, and she's like, oh, you're so, like, it's a battered wife syndrome, sort of. But yeah, he won't stand up for himself early on. But is it the introduction of Ellie that causes him to hit that kid with the stick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she pushes him. I think she gives him that speech of like, you have to hit back harder than you dare.
Right.
Yeah. And then he like tears that kid's ear off basically with the force of his.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so like the violence in this is sometimes so ferocious and animalistic, and then other times, like again when Oscar hits that kid, it just looks like a kid hitting another kid, but like the damage you can do with a stick is nothing. And bodies are fragile in this. Things are it's very. I like to use this term, from Cronenberg or whatever. It's very fleshy. It's very earthy. There's nothing ostentatious about this movie. I think that goes with its smallness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got its own visual language too. Like I think I was saying that it's a thoughtfully shot movie, but there's all these like images of people reflected in glass.
I just saw one right
barriers,
here.
Yeah, like barriers, ghostly images. The like walls, like just things between. And speaking to that theme of like letting people in, or like, and like I think what you're saying about the mom, like he has this. There is this barrier between the adult world and the child's world, and I think one of the things that this movie wants to say is that the child world is like far more savage. Like there's I think this goes to that idea of innocence that I was talking about. Like the children are just like little monsters in this, and like it's the adults who are saying, like they have that debate about, oh, is the death penalty even relevant in our society? Meanwhile, like kids they'll go as far as they can with Oscar. Like they want to push him into the ice, and that's what provokes him to hit that kid in the ear. He's defending himself against three larger kids.
Yeah. And there's the classic dynamic amongst the larger kids of like the one who's the bully and then the others who are the supporters of the bully, and they're like, oh, I don't know, but he's sort of bullying them too.
Yeah, and he's got an older brother who clearly, like when that older brother shows up, the other two kids just like back instantly off. Like that kid has dished it out. It's constantly rolling downhill.
Yeah. And it doesn't like I know we're getting like ahead to the ending or whatever, but this movie doesn't like no one learns a lesson because everybody dies. Like the audience, I suppose, learns a lesson, or like what's the moral? Like there doesn't have to be a moral to that, but like how could we read into that? In that. I don't have an answer for that, but I mean, like, okay, so you've got this bullying that goes downhill. You've got this specter of communism in the background. There's references to Brezhnev, and passing communism is somehow in the back. For a moment, actually, I thought this was taking place. I didn't realize it was in Stockholm, and obviously, I should have known that it was Swedish. But there was, for a brief moment, I was like, is this taking place? Is this in a communist country? But anyway, it wasn't. So you've got all those bullying, you got these everything's rolling downhill, but then the buck stops when it gets to Ellie, and I don't know if there's a meaning to that other than it brings the narrative to an end. But
yeah, I think it does. It's also, I guess, where the vampire story kind of like that, it's the primacy of, like, that's where it's going for, and like at the end the bullying is sort of just secondary to what this movie's really about, which is this relationship, which is, there are questions about, like, is it completely toxic? It is, yes, but you also have these characters that are on the margins and like not afforded anything. I think if anything, it's like both being sort of, I think, is Oscar, it's implied that maybe his dad is gay.
The absent.
Yeah.
Right.
Is he gay? Like, there's questions about that. Certainly he's, I guess he comes to embrace the truth about Ellie in this and accepts her as as a trans girl, but and Ellie is definitely like in that queer space. So I mean, there's I think that the bullying sort of is defining the outsider space and what are the options that Oscar and Ellie have.
Yeah. No, I didn't have a thought as complex as that, but it did, like, it ultimately, it's the catalyst, once she murders all those people in the pool.
Yeah.
Where you're gonna go?
Yeah, I know.
She's got you stay or go.
They must attract so much heat too. I was thinking, like, because there's that her helper, like, just like hanging people upside down and like draining their blood into a jug. Like, that's like just the sound of it sloshing. It's so funny. That guy's just got such shit luck in that town where that dog comes the first time and he's like throwing snow at it.
Yeah,
it's a book at it. And then she's like, do I have to do this by myself? And then in the schoolhouse too, like, the kid's friends come for him. He's like, oh, that revelation, but you know what he's gonna do with that acid. Like,
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and you're waiting, and like the violence in this is so good in that, like, when he pours the acid on his face, all you get is that moment where he goes, you know, and then they cut, you know, like, you don't see any of the melting or whatever, and you're left to wonder what happened to his face. And of course you get the money shot later, you know, at the window. Yeah,
but it's so well controlled too, because when he first goes in, like, all you see is his reflection in the window, and it's blurred.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's not good, but you don't see it in detail. And then, yeah, like, his image is superimposed over Ellie, I think, and then he has to invite her in.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she does the mercy kill. But then you see, like, his, you know, his, like, jaw is showing because, like, it's eaten through his face. And,
It's funny to think of it as a mercy kill. Like, who ends up getting thrown out from the fucking window?
That was him.
Yeah, okay, like, it smashes on that awning.
Yeah.
Like, just bodies are... The another grotesque one was when they find that guy, I guess Hawken had put him in the water, and his body's only, like, it's half frozen in the ice.
Oh, yeah.
And just, like, the way they're pulling it out with a crane or whatever, I'm just like, it's so... I don't want to say realistic, but it has the stink of the real to it. You know, like, nobody dies prettily. Like, that's not what death is. You know, like, if there's misadventure, you're going to look like shit.
Yeah.
I need my pencil.
Ladies
and gentlemen, while I zip into my bag here. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too how like, when Ellie does have to do her own killing, like, she exploits the sort of, well, just the innocence of her, like, just kind of, like, laying by the side of the road and, like, that dude Jock or whatever.
Oh, underneath the after he hugs his buddy goodbye. You know, Thank you for another night of merriment.
Yeah.
And she's like, help me. And he comes in. And she stands up all week, and then all of a sudden, like once she gets that bear grip on you, like, you know, takes the back, you're in a lot of you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you're not getting out of that one. Yeah. Oh, I guess the girl, because the other dude came and, like, hit her over the head and allowed her to escape, which allowed that other girl to start transforming into the vampire.
Oh no!
The cat attack scene, that's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I laughed my ass off. It's like just more and more cats piling onto her.
Yeah.
Falls downstairs.
It wasn't that he hit her with a stick. It's like I remember him kicking her.
Yeah, you're right.
Fucking boot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, of course that's what you'd do.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure, other than the fact that it's a classic sort of trope, it's a classic metaphor, that I've always had a few troubles with the rules of vampirism, you know, like the need to be invited, the burst into flames with daylight, you know, all that stuff. It exists to Fear of the Cross, you know, all your classic stuff. This movie is interesting in that it adheres to those rules, and manages to make something good out of it. You know, like when she comes out into Oscar's house and he won't invite her in, but she like walks in anyway.
Yeah.
It shows her vulnerability, like her willingness to sort of sacrifice for him. But
I think in that moment too, it's like the first you're seeing Oscar taking on some of that, like, domineering attitude of, like, just the cruelty of the other kids.
Right.
And then she's kind of like, she like just kind of bleeds out, like, from all of her, like, pores.
Yeah. And that's another situation where the blood is, like, the special effects are fantastic, because she's fine, and then all of a sudden, like, you just see a patch of blood on her shoulder, and then through the ears and, like, everywhere.
Yeah.
But it just, blood and violence just comes at you from unexpected angles.
Yeah.
But what I was saying about the classic rules of the vampire, they're funny rules, and it's funny that they keep getting, like, that this movie chooses to maintain them. Like I said, it uses that one particular one to good effect, which isn't often thought of as a vampire rule, that you have to invite them in. But you don't see garlic. I don't think you see a cross in this.
I don't think because I think this movie is basically, day religious.
Yeah. Although, who knows? Maybe, I think that's another reason I was thinking of communism, because there wasn't, it was very materialist. So, but obviously it wasn't. But that's just one of the ways it sort of etched into my mind, or crept into my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those rules are always flexible, depending on the movie. It's sort of like feeling it out as it goes. But I think you're right that this does a great job of using them to reinforce the points that it wants to. I mean, obviously the sunlight thing is one that's pretty consistent. Just, sunlight having at least some detrimental effect. The inviting thing, obviously speaking to loneliness is really at the core of this movie. How, so you could say it's a meditation on isolation and aggression and loneliness and how poisonous those things can be. But then with the ironic ending that, like, the connection that Oscar finds is, I mean, do you think, I think some people, like, interpret this movie as, like, sort of a positive thing almost, like, but
like a comedy romance.
Not exactly that, but just like, hey, he's found someone, or like, they're gonna be at least they'll be together. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the horror is that, and it's that threat to the self, the peril of, like, the soul, is that he's going to grow up to be like you see. And I think there are a lot of deliberate echoes between her helper Hacken and Oscar in this, like the superimpositions on the and windows.
Right.
I think that there's an echo of, like they both use knives. There's a bunch of little things that just kind of make those connections for you. And this is his future. Like, he's gonna grow up. He's gonna be out of step. He's gonna grow old, and she's not.
Yeah. Until so he's like, what's Dracula's assistant? Renfield.
Renfield, yeah.
Renfield, yeah. So he's just become a Renfield,
Yeah. Without, like, we don't know if they're, like, at least Renfield got something out of it. I think he had, like, some super strength and stuff like that.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he just gets to pour acid on his face one day.
Exactly.
Like, you got a bad end coming your way.
Yeah.
Until until she dies. I mean, it's entirely possible that she's going to come to a bad end as well.
Yeah. They really bring heat.
Yeah. I like the. So I'm watching them there first with the Rubik's Cube interaction. And it's one of those things that implies that Ellie is. It's because they never talk about her age, but you get the impression that she's been around for a while. And I get that impression from Hacken. But just the way that she does with the Rubik's Cube, like, that's not something you just pick up. That's something that in movies that a genius will understand the Rubik's Cube immediately. But no, you have to learn the Rubik's Cube, and she's learned it expertly. And it's just a nice way of showing. Sophistication to the little girl, but otherwise she acts very much like a little girl.
Yeah, I think so. I think she says that she's been 12 for a long time, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Probably not a lot of room for social, emotional development.
Yeah.
You're on the run all the time. I think that's one of those scenes that makes me think that there's a sincere, like loneliness to her as well. So this bond isn't really just purely about, because I think I've seen it's suggested somewhere that she doesn't really show any interest in Oscar until Hacken dies, and then she like kind of like worms her way into his life. But I don't think that's true at all.
They're building a relationship early on, but you can take the cynical approach to it. Like, you can obviously view it cynically in that, like, she's just grooming another disciple. Hacken's obviously not hacking it. he's fucking up. Like, all we see this guy do is fuck up throughout all this.
That's true. He's having a bad stretch.
Yeah, but we don't know if it's a bad stretch. Maybe this is just like status quo for Hacken.
He's lost.
And so she's like, I need fresh meat. This guy's getting old. That's one way of viewing it. On the other hand, there is something sweet about the relationship between the two of them, even though it's both things.
Yeah, it is.
Because she's lonely and he's isolated and lonely and he needs a direction. It might not go anywhere good for this kid. Or maybe he would just grow up to be perfectly normal, but he never gets a chance to, like, lots of kids are bullied. And bullying is not nothing at all, but I mean, like, people are bullied and then they grow up and they live lives. this didn't have to go this way. It just happens to, because a vampire entered into his life.
Yeah, and that's that sense of tragedy that like provides the emotional juice for the movie too, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, like without that, who cares?
Yeah.
If it isn't, yeah, if there isn't choice.
We don't get a lot of John Carpenter's Thing gets a lot of, and I guess maybe this is from Lovecraft as well, but like the winter, the snow. You know, you don't get a lot of. Maybe I'm wrong, but vampires and snow and cold tend not to go together. But it's like it makes sense. I mean, there's more darkness up there, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Of course, if I was a vampire, I would just go up north. You know?
Yeah, there's that shitty comic 30 Days of Night where that's like a key feature of it.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't. I think it's not often done.
Yeah. So it's like simple things, and it makes it, stupid to say, cold. It makes it like this has a different vibe than, again, getting back to Dracula, which is under Coppola's Dracula is very sensual, very warm, rocky, bare, like trees, forests, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or one of the biggest, honestly, one of the biggest 80s vampire movies, Lost Boys, like set in like California, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen The Lost Boys.
I like that movie. Okay. I don't know. Is it good? I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we want to start contrasting against The Hunger?
So. Yeah.
That might be a good. So the first Tony Scott movie, Tony Scott's debut movie from the man who brought you Top Gun, fucking The Hunger.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we got David Bowie, we got Susan Sarandon, and we got Catherine Villeneuve, I believe. I think it's under drama in my. I guess I'll look it up, see if it'll play in the background. But in terms of aesthetics, very different, in a lot of ways. But we're still dealing with some of the same, quest for a Renfield situation where I think it's Catherine Deneuve. She is about to like dispose of David Bowie, who's going to live like forever in some sort of cadaver. And is moving on to Susan Sarandon in a queer sort of fashion. You wouldn't think that these two movies, which are very different, would like overlap on each other in any way. That's about as far as they overlap, I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe you saw some additional parallels that I'm not thinking.
Maybe a little bit. I'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. This movie, man, I don't know if I like this movie. I do feel like it's the ultimate Tony Scott experience. Like I think it's the blueprint for Tony Scott, just like style over substance, for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that it starts with the like
Bauhaus.
5-minute long like Bauhaus concert. I don't understand the story. Like, so is David Bowie? He's been around for a while, I take it.
Yeah, I gather he's been for about 500 years or whatever, like or 300. He seems to be from the Baroque era.
Yeah, he had a little ponytail.
Yeah, and he was a courtier, and she seduced him and promised him everlasting life, and so it's kind of an Anne Rice kind of thing. I didn't. This story's based on a Whitley Strieber story. I didn't.
What the fuck?
He was a science fiction or fantasy writer who thereafter had like an alien abduction experience, and
oh my god,
I think he's an alien abduction dude pretty much. I think, or was. I'm pretty sure he's dead.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, this story's kind of pretty dumb, and it ends very weird.
Yeah,
it does not have a good ending, and it is style. It's definitely like so. Like I said, Tony Scott's first movie. You actually don't get anything like this. I'll dispute the blueprint for Tony Scott. I think some of the elements of future Tony Scott are here, but like he's really music video here.
That's fair. Yeah, music video is very fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because he's coming from music videos.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then he strips that away afterwards, and I think the lesser effect. Like I like this version of Tony Scott. Maybe you don't like this movie. And I love the style of this movie.
I like the style of this movie. Yeah. I think it does eroticism very well.
Yeah.
Just like in terms of story and stuff like that, less so.
So some of the classic themes of vampires that you outlined at the beginning. So we've got the eroticism. We've got like, is the forfeiture of soul or the corruption of soul? Is that? I guess that kind of happens to David Bowie, because he's going to end up in an eternal paralysis, essentially.
Yeah, I think this one taps more into the queer space again, though, the just being on the outside and that fear of weird bohemian men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only, it's a fear of bohemian women in
Yeah.
this case. Yeah.
I think there's a reading of this movie that's like about the horror of modern feminism. That could be like a very conservative thing. Like she's got her own, she's ghosted her like longtime companion. She's got her own thing. She's she lives in this like beautiful house. She's got time to do her hobbies, but she's terribly lonely. And then she seduces a woman, and nobody, like, there's an attempt from her, I guess, a possible suitor to save her, but he just ends up getting eaten.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like just like heteronormativity does not win in this movie.
Yeah, well, because heteronormativity is fucking really rude and really so aggressive. Like that boyfriend, Susan Sarandon's boyfriend, is just like, what, like off the hook. Oh, you're seeing that woman far too much.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys talking about
Yeah,
for 3 hours?
weird.
Yeah, and you're just like, dude, like, okay, fine, she's a vampire, but you don't know that.
Yeah,
Like,
VR conversation is not a weird thing.
yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't like. I like the thing about aging. The monkey, like, there's all these things that are paralleled to each other that on the surface seem like sometimes it's used to good effect to bring tension to a scene elsewhere, like the monkey doing weird shit.
Yeah.
Or that when it shows the monkey dying of old age and then you cut to David Bowie like rapidly aging.
That was cool.
That's good, and obviously vampires and immortality it makes sense to pair them side by side. Like man's quest to live forever is realized in the form of the vampire, but other than the fact that they're similar to each other, like, I don't know this movie, like, what's the appeal of Susan Sarandon? Like, she's this researcher of immortality and age.
Maybe it's the hope, because none of her companions can actually achieve immortality, or is she just ghosting them? That's what I don't understand, is like, because they're all like, everyone's a failure, everyone winds up in a box.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, like, our kind just like sit in the soil forever, and like, what did she say? Some of the, like, dreaming in the soil, in the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Constantly aware. You're a bitch.
Awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she immediately moves on to the next one.
Yeah, in the most incompetent fashion, because, like, Susan Sarandon has met David Bowie rapidly aging.
True.
She knows that, like, so at any moment, like, putting aside the fact that Catherine Villeneuve, she does have some sort of mental powers, like, the ability to, like, sense things, pick up traces from objects, or send psychic messages to Susan Sarandon and control people and stuff. But like, so there's an element of coercion, psychic coercion with Susan Sarandon, but eventually she's going to put two and two together. And I guess she didn't really have time for it, though. Like, she basically gets turned into a vampire against her will.
Yeah, real quick. She moves real fast with women. Or, like, maybe she always moved real fast, but it just felt like she was, like, really, like, getting frosty on David Bowie, and then... Yeah, she's like, oh, you're good. It almost felt like she got a better deal. I mean, that's what I didn't understand. It seemed like she was actually getting the good stuff, and, like, maybe actual immortality.
Okay.
Because she's like, yeah, we feed, like, 1 in 7 days and no more. Like, she got a real, like, lecture about it, where it felt like... I think David Bowie was saying, like, whoa, when's it going to kick in? Like, is it finally time? And she's like, yeah, it's going to be soon. Like, it felt like she was stringing him along.
Right. Well, perhaps that explains the ending, why Susan Sarandon survives the revenge of the fallen cast-offs, like...
Yeah, she healed up, I guess.
Yeah, and then Catherine Villeneuve did not...
Yeah.
That reversal at the end, like the whole thing looked really cool, but it made no sense.
Yeah.
Cynthia was saying that she read about it, and apparently maybe there was an idea that there was going to be a sequel.
Oh, okay.
Even then, though, I needed that to make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So that we'd want to be excited about a sequel.
Yeah. And this movie didn't do well. It wasn't thought of well, but it has since picked up,
I can see that. Yeah.
Has a bit of a status as but I don't think it gets us very far in if we're thinking about the conversation as a quest for the vampire. And Anne Rice is writing it this time, right?
Right, yeah. Late 70s.
Okay. So, yeah, Whitley Strieber's just reading some Anne Rice.
Probably the case, yeah. So, riffing off it, then it gets a music video treatment, and then, it has style.
Yeah. I love the architecture and everything. Whereas Let the Right One In is very sparse and very 90s Swedish, I assume. Everything's very plain, very brown in the way that, or 80s, sorry, in the way that the 80s was. This is a different sort of 80s.
Yeah.
The other half, the rich half.
Yeah. More the style, the sumptuousness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting for that, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I think that's basically the hunger.
Yeah. If you like what we just said, I don't know. I think it's a movie with David Bowie and Susan Sarandon and Catherine Villeneuve and Tony Scott direction. It's just great to look at.
Yeah.
And I think the makeup's good and the characters are fun. I think I already said the architecture, but just this has a classicism to it that is more in keeping with Dracula.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's got doves like a John Woo movie. It's great.
Just flying all over the place. And your classical music. Another thing Cynthia noticed is that the same, I think it's Schubert. If I'm wrong about that, you can correct me, audience. They also use the same track in Barry Lyndon, and it's like a constant refrain in the background. The
That's cool.
two movies sort of share that. I don't think there's anything to read into that, but it's much more high culture vampire movie, but it has less to say as a consequence.
Yeah.
And it's not a surprise that this movie
it's pulling from the stereo, this sort of the standard vampire playbook, and then just sort of adding that MTV kind of sheen to it.
Yeah. But what you do, and I had said, so when we were younger, we used to, play the White Wolf games, Vampire the Masquerade, and that kind of thing. And I was thinking, between things like Near Dark and Anne Rice novels, this movie, I know Let the Right One In hadn't come out yet, but nonetheless, it still feels a piece. Somewhere in there is the Vampire the Masquerade universe.
Yeah. I think we're probably downplaying too the significance of having just an outright bisexual lesbian experience, bisexual / lesbian experience, that is, in a movie like this too.
Oh, The Hunger.
I can't.
Yeah, no, we are. Yeah, because that was a big deal.
Yeah, I can't. I imagine at the time it probably would have been pretty mind blowing to see.
Yeah, I recall Ebert took. I'm always reading what Sir Ebert has to say, but I recalled something about him finding it notable and highly arousing.
that's what. Oh God. That's their ending, I think.
Yeah, that's one way to...
to meditate on that.
Now, all we need is a little energon and a lot of luck.